And I think it's something that gives me hope. I hope it gives other people hope.
Once threatened, now thriving, it's an incredible comeback story. The return of the beloved humpback whale.
We live in coyote country, and they're not going away.
As coyote sightings continue, animal experts advise how we can coexist with wildlife.
There are salmon here. We know that if we give them a chance, they will figure out how to survive.
One of the most industrialized areas of the Duwamish River now boasts a rest stop for migrating salmon. These stories and more next on CityStream. Hi, I'm Enrique Cerna. Welcome to CityStream from Pioneer Square, Habitat Beach. This small, scenic park is sandwiched between the ferry terminal and the historic Washington Street Boat Landing. When the existing waterfront was first developed, many intertidal areas were lost, including sloping beaches and vegetated hiding spots for fish. But this new Habitat Beach has restored the function of a natural shoreline. To create it, 45,000 tons of sand, gravel, shells, and rocks of all sizes were brought in. These materials mimic the existing ecosystem of Elliott Bay. Just behind me, these waters are witnessing the incredible comeback of humpback whales. This charismatic and winsome creature was once on the brink of extinction from commercial whaling. But global conservation efforts started more than a half-century ago have resulted in a remarkable recovery story. It's a moment of celebration, hope, and resolve to stay the course to meet continued challenges facing this beloved species. Producer Annabelle Cassim and photographer Pete Cassim explain.
One of the things that attracts us to whales is the fact that they are mammals like us. They share many of our characteristics. They breathe air, they give birth to live young, they nurse their young. They have these things we can relate to as land mammals that we are.
Oh my God.
But humpback whales have a special place. They're probably one of the most active species. They're most likely to breach or engage in behavior like slapping their pectoral fins or tails. They're also just really beautiful. They have these long pectoral fins, longer in relation to their body than any other whale species. They make them very maneuverable, and they use them to, touch other whales and reach out. Humpback whales are one of the larger whale species that were exploited and hunted in what's called the modern era of commercial whaling. The modern era of commercial whaling started in the early 1900s when steam-powered catcher boats and explosive harpoons allowed humans to hunt these larger species. There was actually a commercial whaling that occurred inside the Salish Sea. They took hundreds of humpback whales in winter months, suggesting some animals may have been overwintering here as well. Slowly, the formation of the International Whaling Commission ended up putting protections, and that occurred through the 50s and 60s. There were additional protections that came in from the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the Endangered Species Act, and that's when they finally started to recover. When we first started studying humpback whales off the US West Coast, there were only about 500. and that was in the late 1970s. And now we're estimating abundance on the West Coast at over 5,000. We've also seen their return to some areas where they hadn't been seen for 50 years or more. One of those areas is the Salish Sea. And in that area, humpback whales were largely eliminated in the early 1900s. In the period I've studied humpback whales, we would see hardly any humpback whales inside of Puget Sound proper. In our most recent assessment, we could identify over 700 different humpback whales that had been sighted within the Salish Sea in the last 10 years. That's been a very dramatic increase. But humpback whales, along with many of the other baleen whale species, go through an annual migration. They feed in the spring, summer, and fall in more productive, higher latitude waters in the northern hemisphere. And then in winter months, the majority of the animals migrate to lower latitudes, closer to the equator, which is where they give birth and mate. And there is the advantage in these warmer water areas of avoiding killer whales and warmer waters for their calves. One of the amazing things about humpback whales in the North Pacific is there's been increasing collaboration among researchers. And so that's created a nice network. We've actually documented whales from Washington going to Central America, Mexico, Hawaii, and the Western North Pacific. And so now we have an ability to track them along that whole migration. We really benefit from our collaborations with researchers in Mexico, like Jorge Urban, who works out of southern Baja, California.
There are more whales, they look healthy, and the calf production is high. For humpbacks, it's a good time. They are almost in the numbers that maybe they were before the whaling time.
Inside the Salish Sea, that dramatic increase in humpback whales that we've seen in this area is largely good news. But with that, it's brought them into areas of increased vessel traffic, more interaction with human activities.
The humpbacks are coming back to this area. They're right here in Elliott Bay, creating some things that we have to start to think about to make sure that they're safe, getting their needs met, but at the same time, we're getting our needs, like this ferry, met as well. Soundwatch was developed by the Whale Museum back in the 90s. No one was really educating folks about how to motor around these animals. We had reports over multiple days of a young humpback being here in Elliott Bay. We made the decision to go out. We were working with Cascadia Research to get some pictures to assess its health. He was out in the middle of the ferry lanes doing his little humpbacky things, which included a lot of resting. So when he's resting, he's right below the surface of the water, and even though he's big, you can't see him. He was breaching a lot. I got several pictures of him breaching down the entire Seattle waterfront. It became pretty apparent that being in the ferry lanes, that some contact and outreach needed to happen with the boats in the area. So talked to Port Control in Seattle, let them know we were out there, letting these big vessels know where the animal was at, and just making sure he had enough space to do his thing. That day, we all came together, the big commercial boats, the little private boats, the transiting boats, Harbor Patrol, all of it came together to just make space for this animal. And I walked off the boat that day just like, wow, this is what it could be. We were a part of the solution. Maybe we'll have more humpbacks here. If we make space for them, I think they will come.
Humpback whales now are spared from the threat of commercial whaling, but they still face a number of risks and hazards. And among them include vessel strikes, the amount of vessel traffic we have bringing goods. Ships have gotten larger, faster, and more numerous. Another major cause of mortality and injury is entanglement in fishing gear. A lot of their use of the US West Coast is as their feeding destination, spending months and months feeding, and that requires healthy ocean, prey abundance. It isn't just that they're migrating by, but they're using these waters on a kind of repeat basis. And that's an important reason to protect those resources that they rely on. Humpback whales have shown this remarkable recovery. They were decimated by human whaling. It's really exciting to see them come back, not just in numbers, but also return to these waters that they were formerly gone from. It's something that gives me hope. I hope it gives other people hope that we can make positive change in the environment and see these kind of success stories.
For more information on boater education, go to whalemuseum.org and search for Soundwatch Boater Education, or check the website bewhalewise.org. Next on CityStream, coyotes often go unnoticed, but many are on the prowl across the city. How to stay safe and coexist with our wild neighbors. Earlier in this show, we told you about the resurgence of humpback whales. Another wildlife species found in abundance here is the coyote. These urban carnivores often go unnoticed, but the fact is they've been living in the Seattle area for decades. Producer Ian DeVere spoke to biologists and experts to learn what residents can do to stay safe and coexist with our wild neighbors.
I have a high respect for coyotes. Yeah, they are so adaptive.
I just think coyotes are fascinating in general.
I just find them to be amazing animals. They're super intelligent, able to live in different places.
This is an animal that has had to outsmart larger predators as their population expanded. And then they've slowly started to go from this more wild rural animal to do exactly what they do in all other metropolitan areas.
In the early 1900s, coyotes essentially lived between the Rockies and the Mississippi. Now they're found, from northern British Columbia and into Alaska all the way down to Mexico, coast to coast.
Coyotes have probably been here for half a century or quite a bit more.
First coyote was documented in King County in 1937 in Enumclaw.
We hear a lot of, it's urban sprawl, and I think that's true for many, many wildlife species. But not for coyotes, because they're coming to us. They're coming to where the food is.
They're prey generalists, so they can eat lots of different things. There's some research going on right now looking at that actual question.
The Seattle Coyote Study is looking at the diet and genetics of urban coyotes throughout the greater Seattle area. So we use all non-invasive methods, so mainly just looking for scat out on trails and whatnot. And then we use a process called dietary metabarcoding, which basically looks at the genetics of prey items within each of these scats and IDs it to species. That allows us to kind of understand what vertebrates and what plants that these coyotes are generally eating across a long period of time.
Having the scientific evidence, this is how many hundreds or thousands of coyote samples we've taken, and from these areas of the county or Western Washington, that tells us a lot.
Mainly they're eating rabbits, they've got some chicken in their diet, they do have a little bit of cat. Everyone always thinks they're only eating cats, not true.
It's more likely that cats are hit by cars, as far as the statistics out there. But if someone calls us and says, I've let my cat outside, is it possible that coyotes could take it? I can't say no.
I can tell you from looking at scats, there's a lot of blackberry in there, but I've also seen them eating thimbleberries and blueberries. They'll eat a lot of cherries as well. Small mammals like voles and rats that cause, infrastructure destruction or spread diseases and things like that.
To the extent that coyotes are focusing on those types of prey items, it can be really beneficial to human communities.
Coyotes have a very intricate communication system.
Those yips and barks are not, I'm coming for you.
They vocalize just to keep social contact within the family group.
Oftentimes that's just them saying, hey, who's out there? I'm over here. So it's a non-confrontational call, depending on the time of the year. We get those calls all the time, right? There's 30 coyotes here.
It's called the bow jest effect. Something to do with harmonics in their vocalizations, and it makes it sound like there are more animals than there actually are. So there have been studies that have shown that humans overestimate the number of animals by about a third.
Sometimes when they see dogs or people kind of near something they care about, like their dens, they'll emit like a warning bark. And there's nothing to be scared of there. They're just communicating that you're kind of in their space, and they might not want you there.
It's not uncommon for coyotes to follow people along green spaces or down trails.
In Seattle, the peak kind of denning time is between May and June. And so that's often when we see that escorting behavior. And all they're doing is pretty much making sure that you're away from their babies, because that's what they care about. That's what they're protecting.
There's a tremendous amount of fear that doesn't necessarily need to be there. I've been doing this for 23 years, and out of thousands of calls that we take, I'm guessing less than 10 times has there been actual contact between a coyote and a human. So it's very rare.
We don't even have a coyote bite a year. It's more likely the animal's going to follow you, is going to be inquisitive, and that's when we need to have both adults and children educated to have a reaction that's appropriate.
We call it humane hazing. It's really trying to just encourage coyotes to not become too used to being really close to people.
I'm going to throw this stick, you know, or if I've got a coat on, because we're raining right now, and make yourself look novel and big and yell, "Go away, coyote!"
Any activity at all, any behavior you can do that makes them feel unwelcome, the more you can exclude, the better.
If the whole community is doing that, that animal never has the opportunity to think, "I've got it made in your backyard." The encounters we don't want to see is when the coyote doesn't budge, doesn't seem like it's scared at all.
It may not seem like that big of a deal right then and there, but that's not natural for a wild raccoon, coyote, whatever, to be walking around amongst students on a college campus.
People sometimes think that like feeding coyote is helping that coyote, but there's kind of a saying in wildlife biology that a fed coyote is a dead coyote, and that's because it will habituate coyotes to think that people equal food.
That's just going to lead one way: loss of fear, and then the ultimate removal of the animal.
Lethal removals, you just change that territory dynamic. So that's an open house.
We know that another coyote's going to fill that void. The goal now is to educate the community to keep that new coyote wild. It is virtually impossible to reinstill fear into adult coyotes. Now with young coyotes, you can really ingrain fear into those coyotes, and that's really what we should be doing.
In most cases, it's a peaceful coexistence. Coyotes live quite well without having any interactions with people. Mostly what it comes down to is making sure our food is secured, any outdoor food, not leaving pet food on the porch.
Clean up your garbage, your compost, your garden. Again, exclude as well, hot wire, fencing.
You also have a pear tree and a plum tree. I know it's daunting, but you might want to try to keep that stuff picked up because that's why they're coming there.
And there's nothing that coyote will or can do to avoid that. It's on us to make them avoid it by making those spaces unfavorable to them. We live in coyote country, and they're not going away. So the thing of it is learning how to live with them.
Now, if you come across an animal that may be a potential problem, call the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife Enforcement Office at 360-902-2936. And if you spot a coyote that poses an immediate danger, call 911. Just ahead on CityStream, it's a grueling journey for migrating salmon, but a new rest stop offers them a breather along the way. Welcome back to CityStream from Pioneer Square Habitat Beach on the shores of Elliott Bay. This is a beautiful location where the public can walk all the way from downtown right to the water's edge. More than 150 years ago, when Seattle was known as Salish by local tribes, the area was filled with native plants such as ocean spray, shore pine, and salmonberry. Today, these plants are scarce, but the massive transformation of Seattle's waterfront promises to change that. Producer Randy Ng explains.
Part of what makes us whole as a person is to truly understand the value of the place that we stand on, the story of that place, and how it might shape and inform the way we live our life. For this place in particular, we're talking about a food ecosystem that fed people very well for a long time. This used to be the Zizalala village, which was known as an intertidal lagoon that was home to several sea species that fed people really well. In particular, the starry flounder, several different varieties of flounder were harvested here, and people would travel far to come harvest those fish with spears that were made from certain types of plant materials using cordage that were made from certain types of plant material. And so this place, knowing where we began and understanding the changes that it's undergone, is going to help us find a direction into where we can go in the future and how we can bring along with us those teachings of the land and the wisdom that it holds.
We are here today to celebrate the start of construction of the Pioneer Square Streets Improvements Project. We are incorporating native plants and will be adding interpretive panels and ground level etchings depicting uses of indigenous people in the area.
We are trying to have a living memorial, essentially, through the stories of plants. The selection really centers around what my ancestors would have utilized as a traditional technology. And that looks like what plants were fashioned into cordage, into rope, into spears, into hooks, and things that we would have utilized to maintain our way of life. There'll be plants like ocean spray, also known as ironwood here. Various cherry trees will be planted here. Those plants are going to help tell a story. And so when we get to know our place, where we are in this world, we have a better sense of connection to the land and a better respect for it.
Building a better connection to the land is also helping to improve the vitality of this region's salmon runs. Not far from here, along one of the most industrialized parts of Seattle's Duwamish River, work is wrapped up on a project years in the making. As Michael Crow reports, one private company took the lead to create a so-called salmon rest stop.
In a cascade of noise, a landscape is reborn. The setting of Vigor's shipyard on Seattle's Harbor Island is far from untouched wilderness. Here, they work on everything from Navy vessels to the Washington State Ferries fleet. But this effort is not about constructions of steel. This is about softening a section of riverbank for some of its oldest residents, migrating salmon.
So we're dredging here to generate the clean fill that we're going to place up here to build up the shallow water habitat. That'll be about 2.5 acres in size when it's done.
Alan Sprott is VP of Environmental Services at Vigor and says when the company bought the site in 2011, it inherited a legacy of contamination issues dating back to World War I. Remnants of times when the environment was not always prioritized in the quest for progress. But much like in nearby Longfellow Creek, salmon still return to the Duwamish River every year to spawn, and their young face new hurdles returning to the sea, like destroyed salt marshes that provide a gradual transition from freshwater to the salty ocean and food to grow. Vigor agreed to improve that journey as a condition of a consent decree with federal and state governments and tribes to settle historic environmental damage to the lower Duwamish.
And so our solution to that problem was to take really an underutilized portion of the shipyard and create this shallow water habitat that is at the mouth of the Duwamish River.
To that end, they removed an old wooden buildway for ship construction and with it more than 5,000 pilings coated with toxic creosote. They took out 2 other piers and have removed silt laden with PCBs and heavy metals. With that contamination gone, the clean material they take from the bottom now will be used to build up the shallow fish habitat. They've partnered with salmon nonprofit Long Live the Kings and University of Washington researchers for the project.
Salmon are incredibly resilient. They will figure out a way to try to make a go of it. And so what we're trying to do, again, is give them give them a little bit of a boost.
Emily McCartan of Long Live the Kings describes this as a rest stop, a relatively sheltered section of healthy, functioning estuary that will let young salmon gather themselves on the way out to sea. Shallow water will support vegetation, which attracts insects for salmon to feed on.
So as they're migrating out of the river and starting to hit this salt water for the first time, they have a place where they can find food sources, they can gather energy, and hopefully we'll see that eventually translate into better survival.
Before work began, researchers sampled water and the diet of salmon passing through here and across the river at Jack Block Park. They will continue to monitor after completion to gauge success and hope this can be the first step in a chain of industrial projects to assist fish.
When you imagine healthy habitat for salmon, you would imagine a really pristine flowing river with trees on either side and really clean, clear water. They need all of those things. What we also know is that Seattle's not going anywhere, and we need to be able to figure out ways that the systems that work for humans are also working for the environment and for the fish and wildlife that also depend on them. We're all interconnected.
Certainly, salmon need all the help they can get. Chinook spawning in the rivers of Puget Sound are listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act, and runs have been declining for decades.
As the expression goes, the victim died of 1,000 small cuts. You look at Puget Sound as a whole, we've hardened the shoreline, we've reduced the grass beds, and so forth. No, we're not going to put Harbor Island back into mud flats anytime soon, but the small benefits that we can achieve will pay off.
Back at Vigor, in-water work is slated to wrap up in February, and they'll also improve stormwater controls to reduce runoff. Then, researchers will return over time to study how the fish are doing. Hopefully, there will be more of them to follow.
For me personally, it's a really rewarding project to have been involved with it from start to finish. And like I said, it's something that's going to be on the landscape forever. Long past anybody that's involved in it is on the planet, that will still be here.
Fish returning to a more natural setting in the heart of a forest of steel.
It'll be exciting. That's what we're looking forward to.
More like what they knew for the many years before humans changed this place.
Hope is not lost. When we have the opportunity to say, there are salmon here, we know that if we give them a chance, they will figure out how to survive. We owe it to them and to ourselves to give them that chance.
Vigor says the Habitat project cost about $28 million and the accompanying stormwater improvements another $5 million. They hope this will provide a model for integrating natural landscapes into industrial spaces. We'll be right back. That wraps up this edition of CityStream from Pioneer Square, Habitat Beach, along the Seattle waterfront. If you'd like to see more outstanding Seattle Channel programs, go to our website, seattle.gov, and search for feature shows. I'm Enrique Cerna. Thanks for watching.